Yeah, I like that. As much as I like to take a lot of the music I listen to as it comes, I'm constantly chasing this particular feeling. I'm overjoyed that this early on into my channel, I have the opportunity to talk about that feeling, and especially on an album that does it so well. Because there are a few emotional tones and atmospheres more difficult to pull off and maintain than that of being dreamlike. In music journalism, the adjective dreamy has lost so much of its meaning, often being a stand in for meandering or wavy or trippy songwriting. What I think sets Just Mustard and their sophomore record, Heart Under apart, is not just Katie Ball's unreachable and ghostly vocals, or their tight industrial rhythm section, or their signature shrieking dual guitars, but what sets them apart is their ability to bore their way into places both subconscious and violently confrontational in a dreamlike way that almost makes the listener feel as if they're inventing the record as it happens. But this isn't to say the record sounds easygoing or meditative. I'm actually saying the opposite. It's been a long time since I've heard a record this virulent, loud, or menacing. And while there are certainly more distorted and crushing punk and metal albums, this record achieves a dreamlike cacophony by way of soundplay that pushes how loud accessible music can be. Just Mustard is a group that really knows how to toe the line between creating the musical equivalent of face-melting nuclear wind and catchy, concise song structures. This record is an evolution on a lot of the sounds and ideas they introduced on their relatively lo-fi debut. Combining shoegaze with the metallic atonality of no wave, the rhythmic tendencies of post-punk, and more in Heart Under than ever before in their discography, the assured pop power of 80s new wave. Only now, the ear-piercing, tinnitus-inducing noise is in full illustrious display. Trying to describe how despondent, void, and overwhelming so much of this record is really impossible, especially given that I sat around for a long time trying to think of those adjectives, just to describe the exhilarating mix of tense beauty and controlled chaos that this record is. Within the apocalyptic counterplay between the two guitars of these songs lies a fragile serenity in the hooks and melodies of these songs. It's like a moss garden that catches fire every 3 minutes. The 10 tracks of this album have that amazing quality you often find on 10-track records. Every song feels like its own unique statement with tight sequencing that is trimmed to perfection. This is a watertight exercise in haunting surrealism, building up and crashing down in more and more cacophonous ways. Every song more or less begins with similarly tight, tense grooves and varying degrees of noise rock guitars, and all of them reach these overpowering, world-shattering conclusions. But it's the progressions of these tracks that show just how masterful Just Mustard are as songwriters. For as many times as they build up to a uniquely frightening or atonal wall of fury, it always feels fresh, logical to its song, and most importantly, earned. Combining this with ominous and often unsettling lyricism, they have a thorough knowledge of how to create and multiply tension. Not only that, but also how to pay it off in gloriously entertaining fashion. The opening track 23 is a slow-burning depiction of everything that makes this record great. It begins with this characteristically unsettling and lurid drone backing vocalist Katie Ball's drawn-out wails. Her voice is somewhere in between angelic and psychotic, and this is a dichotomy that she takes full advantage of as the track progresses, with these dejected mantras of "I would have cherished" and "waiting for the sun in my hand." The lyrics are as cryptic here as they are across the record, giving little more than off-kilter choruses and these tone-setting phrases. However, the function it serves is purposeful. It is to unsettle the listener. The puzzling displays of destruction, identity, and obsession that they seem to hold are perfect accents to these already tense tracks. The instrumental to this opening track is a masterful drone, and while it only ebbs and flows between the same two notes for about 5 minutes, it makes the most out of these two notes. It also doesn't hurt that it's accompanied by the first of many killer drum beats that give so much power to these songs. The linear progression of this opener as it bursts into its distorted final stages and eventual come down sets an intimidating MO for the rest of the record, one that is taken by full force by the following track, Still. Where do I even start with this one? Its main groove is a spacious nightcrawler with an impeccably cool and apathetic lead vocal. Its moody, reverb-heavy atmosphere sounds like pins dropping in a nighttime alleyway. It really makes the song sound like a place you wouldn't want to be at night. And these verses are some of the most sunglasses at night, neon demon, Ryan Gosling and Drive verses I've ever heard. And when this gives way and the chorus does hit, a lot of the instrumentation actually drops out and is replaced by this insane cycling metallic sound and these blaring guitar riffs that actually reprise themselves for this hellish finale at the end of the track. And this grand finale is actually indicative of a lot of the climaxes across this record. There are often larger, more menacing, more unwieldy versions of instrumental bits heard before, only now turned up to 11 and viciously paced with fast tempos. To say this track starts in a nightmare and finishes in a fever pitch of insanity is actually an understatement. However, this almost reads as an overstatement, given the fact that its following track, I Am You, is one of the scariest and most dejected songs I've literally ever heard. It features an absolutely harrowing vocal performance characterized by lyrics talking about wanting to change everything about yourself, a sentiment that's actually reflected in a mantra that breaks out in the second half of the track, change my head, change my head. And the instrumental build of this song is one of the most stellar and horrifying on the entire project. It begins with this moody, slow, cycling bass line and their typically girlish and haunting vocals, but rises in temperature with the addition of this insane percussive guitar effect, with one of the two guitars being dedicated to playing a metallic crunch on every downbeat as the other one wails away in an ever-heightening drone. While this is already a freakish combination of sounds, the halfway point of the song features an incredible moment of songwriting brilliance, as these huge walls of distortion and drum hits surprise the listener and instantly ramp up the tempo. Past this point of inflection, the drum patterns become tenser and speedier, the metallic crunches come at quicker intervals, the drone is ever heightened, and the lyrics are even more unhinged than they were to begin with. And it's over this planned musical anarchy that the already hectic mantra of the track rises to a level of satanic. This point where the audience is purposefully put off balance ahead of the tensest moments of the track, forever changing the song's trajectory, is like the audio equivalent of a Dutch tilt. It's just such a masterfully off-putting display of sound, one that is immediately matched by the following track, Seed. At this point in the track list, it became apparent that they're really only in competition with themselves, trying to outdo crescendos and builds that only they can really pull off. It's actually incredible. It's even more incredible due to the fact that Seed might be one of the loudest and most intimidating songs I've heard in recent years, in any genre. First, its chugging, churning tremolo guitar is absolutely mind-blowing. The way its metallic tones ebb and flow outside of the rhythm and back into it again, exploding at the end of each bar and restarting the pattern again. It is hypnotic to the most powerful degree. And the build of this song might just be the loudest and most insane feat that Just Mustard pull off on this project. Throughout the track, there are these bridges highlighted by this single stomping bass note that appears with more and more frequency, pointing that a huge build is going to come off of it. But as soon as you think it's going in that direction, the middle section of the song cuts out into a beautiful ambient passage highlighted by subtle swirling guitars and delayed vocal effects. Approaching like an oncoming train during this moment of tense and fragile peace is the most head-splitting and nonsensical wall of distortion on the entire project. And coming out of this wall of noise is the build that had been promised throughout the track. It is a stomping groove straight out of the last couple of Swans projects, only now overtaken by an ultralight beam of impenetrable noise guitar. Blue Chalk is the relative calm after the storm, an ambient passage that, although it evolves into these fractured, clinging drum hits, presents an oddly beautiful soundscape to pace out the listener before dunking them back into the sound and fury of the rest of the project. Atop this atmosphere is displaced lyrics talking cryptically about shadows and colors and sight. Again, Katie is playing it purposefully obtuse and indirect with the lyrics, and the incomplete view you're often left with, that of being some spare emotions and images, is actually a perfect fit for an album that is directly opposed to playing it straight. Early is one of a few tracks that takes heavy inspiration from post-punk and 80s new wave, being a standout track for Katie as she wails on this soaring chorus, better to know now. On this song, more than almost any other, she is in the spotlight, with her voice taking precedence over the relatively mild peak the song hits. Having her shouted refrains be the focus of the track actually provides a nice catchy texture to the record, one that is incredibly refreshing and valuable to its pacing. Following this track is Soar, and although it starts in territory that is somewhat familiar given its late placing in the track list, ends in what is probably the most insane sounding wall of noise that this record, which is full of noisy walls doing noisy wall things, actually ever reaches. The hypnotic and repetitive nature of it almost makes you forget that you're going deaf and or developing tinnitus, especially because it's probably the loudest thing I've heard in 2022. The following song is the type of stunning moment you often see on the best experimental records, where the group curbs its more subversive edges in favor of a more poppy yet uncompromised direction. Mirrors is a certified new wave rager, complete with its tried and true dance rhythms and haunting close vocal harmonies describing looking into a mirror and seeing somebody else. It's a beautiful, relatively low-key moment that, while being supremely trippy and firmly within the shoegaze hellscape they've envisioned thus far, fulfills its role as a poppier crossover track, and that is bridging the gap between the accessible and the out there, to show that even the bombastic noise rock of this record is in close kinship with more acceptable styles of music. It's because of tracks like these that their ability as adept songwriters gains more merit, because if you can make a hit like the rest of them, then your wildest inclinations can ride off of that good faith as well. Penultimate In Shade is a hard-rocking monster of a track featuring pounding drums and bass and an absolutely busted guitar line that sounds like the blaring sirens of hell. Its intro is seriously menacing in all of the right ways. The way that bouncing metallic hits build into this melancholy chorus is one of the most satisfying moments I've heard on a song all year. The chorus refrain of "I've seen the night, I've seen it take light," backdropped by the siren guitar line, is a fantastically melodramatic combination of sounds that gets better every time I hear it. It also helps that this is probably the most direct and immediately impactful song on the record too. Heart Under actually closes with one of its most depressing and meditative moments, the slow and spacious build of Rivers. The instrumental of this song is constantly ebbing and flowing, coming to a more languid and purposeful conclusion than one would expect at this point, but still supremely overpowering and shrieking in its awesome magnitude. The lyrics of the track do a wonderful job tying together the album by actually posing way more questions than it answers. The feelings of longing and regret that have seemed to have plagued most of this record come in full force in the ominous and surreal final lines. I drew you in my daydream, swimming, swimming. Could I have changed a thing? Swimming, swimming. Yeah, I don't think my rational capacity for human emotion can tell you what that does to me. All I can say is that its mystery, as well as the mystery of the rest of the project, is actually something that I feel privileged to try and untangle. This record is a nocturnal animal, its mood living somewhere in between morbid lucidity and the most maniacal of daydreams. Taking equally from early Swans, The Cure, Sonic Youth, and My Bloody Valentine, as well as a whole host of other 80s goth rebels, Just Mustard has crafted a noise apocalypse that does so much in blurring the lines between the accessible and the out there. Oftentimes, their headiest and most experimental ideas are not only neighbors with their blurred pop tendencies, but they actually inform and reinforce each other. It is by their ability to craft concise and endlessly replayable songs that their dejected melodies and off-kilter grooves can really shine. They're not Trojan horsing or forcing these experimental aspects of their music into shapes they're not made for. Because what I love about this record is how they display their brand of controlled chaos with pride and respect to the noise. And this noise is something that emanates from and flows out of them, much like the lyrical motif of the river that's often brought up on this record. More than almost any band I've heard in a long time, their overpowering walls of noise feel less like they're writing songs and more like they're harnessing and channeling a power greater than themselves. Less like lightning in a bottle and more like lightning in an amplifier. If this record is really an exercise in anything, it's in control and power. Because when I listen to this record, it radiates with a pure darkness and overwhelming insanity that is impossible not to cherish. It is a powerful sound, a dreamlike portal to an overworld of whacked-out mysticism. And although it remains cryptic, dreamy, nearly indescribable, the clear image I can make out of it through the smoke and mirrors is host to a uniquely talented band creating a uniquely wonderful and progressive rock record. I think this album wholeheartedly deserves a 10 out of 10. It's just so maniacal, lovely, and fugly in equal measure. I am a junkie for this album. I am addicted to this album. So yeah, you should really listen to this album. Go out and listen to it right now. Listen to it on repeat. Listen to it until you have tinnitus and until you're in a doctor's office blaming me for sending you there. Or blaming them for sending you there. I didn't make the album. But I did say, go listen to it. See you in the next one.